Good morning. I'm James Ford, and I am one of the guiding teachers of our Empty Moon Zen Circle. I um, have the enormous pleasure of reflecting today on the cusp of of the Buddha's birth. The uh, the master Nanyang Weizhang called to his attendant 3 times, and each time his attendant responded. The master said, "I was about to say I was ungrateful to you, but you're ungrateful to me." According to the Buddhist lunar calendar observed in most of Asia, the Buddha's birth will be observed this year in the middle of May. However, in the late 19th century, the Japanese officially adopted the Gregorian calendar. It was perhaps unintended, but it became a genuine gift for many of us who struggle with consulting tables to track holidays floating through a lunar calendar. With that, many of us in the West, and particularly anyone following a Buddhist school rooted in Japan, the Buddha's birth is always celebrated on April 8th. The Japanese call it both the Kambutsue, or Nativity Festival, and more often Hanamatsuri, the Flower Festival. In many Zen centers here, it's a family affair. For children, it's often the most memorable part of attending Buddhist religious festivals, being able to pour sweet tea over a small image of a child Buddha standing in a shallow bowl. You might picture the statue. He's chubby and stands with one arm reaching down with a finger pointing to the earth, and the other arm stretching up with a finger pointing to the heavens. The ceremony came from China to Japan at the beginning of the 7th century and has since been passed on to us in the West. I think of that baby Buddha and find myself reflecting on the koan of the national teacher and those 3 calls. I'll come to that and why, but first some other thoughts. The 6th ancestor in Zen's long mythical history, now turning into history, Wei Neng, had 5 Dharma successors. One of them was Danyang Weizhang. He was born in the year 675 and died 100 years later. At least those are our traditional dates. Often long lives are pious embellishments in hagiographies. In this case, our teacher Robert Aitken suggests he had to have been at least in his 90s when he died. So, in this case, genuinely a long life. After completing his formal training with Wei Neng, he retreated to the countryside and tried to live in obscurity. With some success, he lasted there for 40 years, but then he was called by imperial invitation to the capital. You can read order here. When an emperor invites, you are generally wise to accept. He spent many years there and would be treated as a personal teacher by 2 emperors. He was actually given the official title Teacher of 2 Emperors during his lifetime. After he died, Weizhang was given the title National Teacher. While there have been several national teachers, when we hear the title without a specific name attached, it always means Nanyang Weizhang. We don't have life dates for his attendant, Danyun Yin Zhen. We do know he was Weizhang's sole heir, and we know their lineage died with Danyan. However, although both very much continue to guide those of us who walk the koan way. Weizhang appears here in the Gateless Gate and twice in both the Blue Cliff Record and the Book of Equanimity, 3 of the classic koan anthologies, while Danyuan appears in 2 koans. Some commentators on this koan observe how the relationship between a teacher and a student can be fraught, and we can see how this might catch one's attention from a surface read of the dialogue. But not without merit. One comment I ran across found an analog for how complex this relationship might be by citing the Buddha's relationship with his attendant, Ananda. Ananda, the Buddha's cousin, was his faithful attendant for most of the Buddha's teaching life. He's also renowned for his prodigious memory. Ananda is the legendary source of the recorded sayings and doings of Gautama Siddhartha, which he was called upon to recite before the gathered monastics after the master died. For a consideration of the relationship between teacher and student, he didn't have his own awakening under the guidance of the Buddha. It would come later after the Buddha's death, just ahead of that first great council. So, yes, one can see many complexities for the teacher as well as the student. For the student, first, to find their own way, to see into the matter deeply, to understand for themselves. It speaks to a sense of personal quest bound up with that relationship, which over time is certainly wrapped up with other feelings. Wanting to please, probably resenting failures of various sorts on the part of the teacher, many things mixed up together. And for the teacher as well, we like to make the teacher a perfect mirror to the student, a perfect master. We can do this especially if the teacher is long dead, and complexities of personalities are, shall we say, polished. For both good and ill, our culture and our time tends to notice failure. Our shadows are on full display. And what gets mixed in for us as students is figuring out where the line is when teachers' shortcomings or worse become genuinely problematic. How that line might be different for different people only adds to the complexities. A worthy consideration and worth a moment, maybe more. But it isn't what we're really being invited into with this case. Here we have an exchange, those three calls, and then we have that enigmatic comment. 2 points. So, first the calls. 3, of course, is a magic number, beloved and used in folklore and religion, and not just for the really large Christian Trinity or Buddhism's Trikaya, but they live in our mythic imagination in smaller and sometimes very important ways. For instance, 3 guesses, 3 wishes, and even, well, 3 bears. Here, 3 calls. There is some kind of perfect number. And importantly here, we get 3 responses, their own kind of perfect number. Attendant, yes. Attendant, yes. Attendant, yes. Aitken Roshi points out that as the attendant was a mature practitioner, each response was as fresh as the first, which reminds me of one of those early brainwave studies of meditators. It was an attempt to compare yogic practice and Zen. The yogi was set to meditate using a mantra. She was wired up, and then from behind at random moments a bell was sounded. Each time the biofeedback monitor showed no reaction. The yogi was one with the mantra. However, when the bell sounded for the biofeedback wired up Zen practitioner, each time there was a full startle response, and there was no diminution over time. Each bell strike was met with a full response. Attendant, yes. Attendant, yes. Attendant, yes. At least, as I like to tell this anecdote, Chan seems to think I've garbled the story over time. I guess that has its own lessons for the wise. For me, the 3 calls are each like that proverbial box and its lid. A perfect match, a perfect fit. Not precisely 1, but certainly not 2. Then there's the gratitude thing. Here we move into particularly deep waters. Instead of ingratitude, another translation says, standing with my back to you. I find that image interesting. Of course, anyone who has been investigating the koan way for any time quickly notices that abuse is often, in fact, praise. So, ingratitude isn't a bad way to go when speaking of something where words begin to fail. This reversal of the ordinary, using abuse as praise, is another of those pointers, those invitations we encounter on the Zen way. Things are just as they are, and sometimes they deserve a little closer look. Here's where I find the connection to the Buddha's birthday. It's not a reach to hear those words about, I thought I was ungrateful, and now I see you're ungrateful, and hear the words attributed to the Buddha himself on the day of his birth. In that dream time, at his birth, he stands and takes 7 steps in each of the cardinal directions. Then he points one hand upward and the other down, declaring, beneath the heavens, above the earth, I alone am the Holy One. For me, in the midst of all this, I recall a comment on Hui Zhang's call of ingratitude from my koan teacher, John Tarrant. I thought I was alone in the universe, and now I see you too are also alone in the universe. It's a powerful observation. On one hand, a straightforward pointing into the true deep, where each of us is the center of the unfolding universe. And, of course, this line also exposes one of the shadows of our way, where seeing for ourselves can occasionally blind us to the fact there are many, many other centers to the great mess. No doubt the odd traveler on the intimate way will succumb to Narcissus' madness and perhaps even share his fate. I've seen some advanced Zen practitioners flirt with this demon, noticing they have plumbed the depth, but missing something. It's noticing the other at the same solitary place that explodes the danger and invites us all along towards something truly worth noticing. Robert Aitken once commented on the conclusion of the Fox koan, where there's a lovely and strange encounter between the teacher Bai Zhang and his student Wang Po. The Roshi observes how Bai Zhang thought he was alone in the universe, but there he saw Wang Po, too, is alone in the universe. Lots of centers in this universe, the great mess. My first successor, Melissa Blacker, offered her comment on this comment. I've always assumed it was a reference to Shakyamuni's words, in heaven above and the earth below. I'm the only one. And she concludes, it has a deep meaning for me, expressing that our heart minds are the same. I can only add for me, too, and for you as well. This, just this, dangerous, powerful, and all of it an invitation. Don't forget the meeting. Attend it. Yes. And the summary. We are each discovered within the great play of the mystery unfolding. Just this, just you, just me. Ordinary. And, well, quite extraordinary. So, what to do with all this? As it happens, Danyang Weizhang and Danyuan Ying Zhen appear in one more case together. It's repeated as case 18 in the Blue Cliff Record and case 85 in the Book of Serenity. The Emperor Suzhang asked the national teacher, "What would you like from me when you die?" Nanyang replied, "Build me a seamless tomb." The emperor said, "Please give me the tomb's design." The master sat quietly for a time and then said, "Do you understand?" The emperor said, "No, I don't." The national teacher responded, "When the time comes, go to my successor, Danyuan, and ask him." After the national teacher died, the emperor sent for Danyuan and told him about this encounter. Danyuan replied with a verse. South of Xi'an, north of Tan, there is gold that fills the land. Beneath a shadowless tree, a fairy. In the crystal palace, there is no one who knows. Here it all comes together. Master and disciple are totally different, and in the very same heartbeat, they're one. The seamless tomb and the building are not two. In this world, there is a great treasure. It is a rich vein that runs through you and me. Find that shadowless tree, discover the silence that the national teacher presented to the emperor. With that, A center of the universe appears, a tree with no shadow. Within the dream world, you will discover that it is also a boat, the great ferry that carries each of us to a farther shore. All this, those calls and that talk of ingratitude, take us to our true home, which is no place other than here, a fire cast upon the world. Always it's here, smoldering, coals everywhere, waiting to ignite into flame. Shifting images show it is a meeting of all the centers of the universe. With another shift, it is a gathering of the birds of heaven. Another shift, and it is a palace of many rooms. The true intimacy, our common inheritance.